Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from Stricken, Aberdeenshire in Scotland, where our guest today is a very special academic. Everyone who's ever lifted a pint of beer has cause to be grateful to this man, and everyone with a regard for racial equality should listen carefully to what he's got to say. Sir Godfrey Henry Oliver Palmer OBE is a Professor Emeritus in the School of Life Sciences at Heriot-Watt University and a human rights activist. He discovered the barley abrasion process while a researcher at the Brewing Research Foundation in the late 60s. In 1998, Palmer became the fourth person and the first European to be honoured with the American Society of Brewing Chemists Award of Distinction, considered the Nobel Prize of Brewing. In 1989, Geoff Palmer became the first black professor ever in Scotland, and he was knighted in the 2014 honours. Today I've got the great pleasure of speaking to Geoff Palmer about his life and works. But first, over to Glasgow and Tasmina, with your tweets, emails and your messages.
Thank you, Alex. We've had a fantastic response to last week's show on the Statue Wars, featuring Professor Sir Tom Devine and Professor John Robertson, with hundreds and hundreds of messages and record viewing figures of over 750,000 on Facebook alone. We hear first from Tom Gray, who says, "Just hope the current school leavers are better equipped with a fulsome understanding of our history, as Sir Tom suggests they should be, than they were in the 1960s. Shona Dougal says, "Very interesting points raised as to what to do or not to do with the statues and other monuments, which are causing offence to many. It is great listening to Tom Devine and Alex Salmond." Harry says, "Why not a new plaque attached, stating the world has evolved, ethics have changed, slavery is unacceptable in 2020. TJ Schumann from Johannesburg says, "Once again, humankind shows itself as the most destructive species on earth, even destroying its own monuments." Marcel from Ontario says, "This is so sad to see history destroyed, no matter what happened in the past. We live too much in the past." Edwin from London says, "The Western European civilization has built its wealth and legacy on the strength of colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, mercantilism, which is mostly based on the exploitation and marginalisation of Africans. I'm learning since the death of Floyd that Western European civilization is not a meritorious one." Deborah from Durban says, "No, maybe it wasn't meritorious, but it is what it is. Every event in history was progress from the previous event. Every generation has its own tale to tell and progress step to take, at the same time looking back at history and remembering and making a further leap of progress. Every person who has and ever will live on this planet has a purpose in life, for good or bad." Tarja from Helsinki says, "Don't need the statues of racists to get educated. History is what we need to learn." Gideon from Namibia says, "I don't see any point on taking down slave masters' statues. I think the better option is to keep history and let the current generation change their hearts." Nancy says, "This is all part of history. Destroying them won't change anything. It would be a great history lesson to others never to let these things happen again." Stuart says, "It's nothing short of vandalism for whatever the reason." And finally Brenda says, "I think the statues should stay. They are a reminder of what has been. What will be next? Burning books? These statues and street names educate people. They're either ignored by people or they can enlighten folk. Let's not brush our history under the rug. Better in your face than not, I think."
The Windrush generation describes that group of people, largely from the Caribbean, who came to the UK between the late 40s and the early 1970s as part of the large immigration that took place for people to take up jobs, often in the National Health Service or other industries which were suffering from a post-war labour shortage in Britain. The name Windrush comes from the ship, the HMT Empire Windrush, which brought the first group of people from the Caribbean countries to the UK in 1948. As many of the Caribbean countries were at that time part of the British Commonwealth, the people who came across were automatically British subjects and entitled therefore to live and to work permanently in the UK if they so wished. Among those coming across in 1948 was Geoff Palmer's mother. And 7 years later, at 14 years, 11 months old, Godfrey Palmer arrived in the UK to join his mum. I now take up that story with Professor Sir Geoff Palmer, who joins me from his home in Pennycook. Geoff, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Right, can we start this at the beginning? Your mother came to London in the late 40s as part of what's now known as the Windrush generation. Was your mum actually on the Empire Windrush ship, or did she come in another boat from Jamaica?
No, she wasn't on the Empire Windrush. She was on the Mauritania. And all the Cunard Line ships, I'm told, at that time that was transporting people, ended in IA. So I came on the Ascania.
And that was some years later. You were, 14 when you arrived to join your mother?
Yes, I came when I arrived at Liverpool in 1955. And when I got to London, I was 14 years and 11 months. And that 1 month has been very significant in my life because when I arrived, and my mother tried to take me to work the next morning after traveling 5,000 miles, I had no idea that I was coming to join her to work. And she was taking me to work, and a man at the door stopped us and said to my mom, "Where are you going?" And she said, "We're going to work." And the man said, "You can go to work, but your son can't because he's only 14 years and 11 months and he has to go to school because you leave school in England at 15 in those days." So my mom begged and pleaded at the door that she needed me to work to get her money to help her. And she spent £86 to bring me here. And the man said, "I don't make the rules. He's got to go to school for 1 month." And thus she had to take me to school.
So that was a lucky intervention from your point of view, given what happened later, Geoff.
My mom took me to the local comprehensive school in London, North London, and they rejected me. They gave me a little note saying I was ESN. That means, I was told later, educationally subnormal. So she had to take me to the secondary modern school. I played cricket. The games master saw me, took me to a trial. And the next day he told me I was playing for London, schoolboys cricket team. And I played for London, and the local grammar school headmaster, Highbury County, Mr. King, saw the report that a secondary modern schoolboy was playing for London. And he asked my mother and the school whether they would transfer me to Highbury County. So that's how I got into a grammar school, because of my cricket.
And you were having your own educational struggles at the time and finding it quite difficult to establish yourself through school and university. Tell us about the obstacles you encountered in that process.
I arrived at Leicester University in 1961 to do an honours degree in botany. And 1964, I got an honours degree in botany. I went back to London. I went to the Labour Exchange. They gave me 2 jobs, one in a betting shop and the other one to peel potatoes. So I thought peeling potatoes was close enough to botany, so I took that. And I peeled potatoes from June 1964 until my famous interview in December 1964.
Tell us about that interview, Geoff, in 1964. Tell us exactly what happened there.
I was peeling potatoes, as I said, and I was promoted to fish cook. So the company had great hopes of me staying, but I saw an advert for a research degree, a master's degree, and I applied for it. And I went to the interview. It was at Reading University, and there was a panel. And I'd not seen a panel like that because I recognized the man sitting just to the right. And as soon as I walked in and sat down, it started, and he just said to me, "Young man, why don't you go back to where you come from and grow bananas?" And I was taken aback by this, and the professor to his right, who was heading the interview, looked and said something like, come. And I just responded by saying, "It's difficult to grow bananas in Haringey." And of course, I didn't get the job. But I saw another advert and that advert was for a PhD in Edinburgh at the Heriot-Watt University. I did my research on barley. We changed the concept of how the grain grew, how the grain digested itself, and that laid the research or scientific foundation for my research later on in industry.
The gentleman that suggested that you should be growing bananas, this was a famous politician of the day, was it not?
Yes, it was. It was Sir Geoff Joseph. And the fact is that I've been saying this since 1964 when it happened, and newspapers have carried it. Why that interview was so important to me and the statement, it wasn't because I was concerned about it being racial. No, I was not. What I was concerned about was that somebody was threatening my sense of belonging. I had developed that sense of belonging when I arrived in Liverpool. I had to get to Paddington to meet my mum. I realized the sense of belonging was important in terms of me dealing with racism. And therefore, my sense of belonging was being challenged. And that's why I responded in that way. And since that time, I've taught students and I've given many community lectures. And I stress to young people that your sense of belonging is critical, because that's what the racists go for.
You developed the barley abrasion process. Tell us a bit about what that is, Geoff. I know it's important, but I'm not very certain what exactly it is.
When I went to work at the Brewing Research Foundation in Surrey for the brewing industry, and the money was provided primarily by the brewing industry, and I said, you know, if the brand did it, and any child can see it, the brand covers the whole grain. Therefore, if the bran is digesting the grain, we should stimulate the bran as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what we did.
Of course, that breakthrough and the other parts of your research probably knocked more pennies off more pints than any Chancellor of the Exchequer in history, and resulted in you gaining the distinction of the ASBC award. The Nobel laureates of the brewing industry. What are these great distinctions in life? How did that relate for you in terms of your conversations with people when they realised the eminence of the professor emerging in Heriot-Watt University?
I just feel that my mum, when she came up to Scotland for me to get my a Doctor of Science degree, which is a rare research degree, you have to submit all your publications. And she came up, and when she went back to London, her friends asked her, you know, Miss Ivy, how is your son doing in Scotland? And she said, well, he's still at school. And she said, he's not really doing anything. He's just God's vehicle. So again, I see myself as that, but I'm so grateful to the Americans who gave me this ASBC award. And that when I got it, I was only the fourth person. And I was the only European who took to have it at that time. So it was quite an accolade, and I appreciated it very much.
Join us after the break, where we continue our discussion with Professor Sir Geoff Palmer, where we turn our eye into current controversies and get Geoff's opinion on what should be done. Join us then. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Professor Sir Geoff Palmer, Professor Emeritus at Heriot-Watt University and human rights activist. Geoff, on the current controversies of Black Lives Matter, I mean, you in your years of campaigning will have seen a number of waves of protests searching for equality. In your estimation, is this latest surge following the deaths in America of George Floyd? Is there something different about this latest wave of protest?
Well, yes, I think there is something very different. The fact is that I call the death of George Floyd, I call it a crucifixion. And the policemen That's the law. With its knee on the neck of a black person for almost 9 minutes, showed the world there was something very, very wrong. And to me, it is not murder because nobody's been tried, but I see it as a crucifixion of a race which started with that definition, which said that black people are inferior to white people. And we've passed it on from generation to generation, and we cannot pass it on to another generation to pass it on again. Something must be done.
One of the consequences of the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement has been the toppling of statues of people associated with racism all over the planet. But you yourself, as a long-term campaigner on these issues, have a slightly different attitude than many in terms of what should be done about such statues.
Well, yes, I had a long-term view that our statues, like the stately homes which were built from slave money, like the Gallery of Modern Art, that's the slave master's house. You know, the necropolis was built by a slave owner. In Edinburgh, we have street names, like the Fort Street and Rodney Street, all associated with slavery. Half the new town, some of the buildings are from slavery. And therefore, I've always felt that we should be putting up plaques. We should have narratives on these plaques to say, this person or this building and this street was named after X, Y, and Z, and they had this role in slavery, and it must be accurate. I don't want them down. Out of sight, out of mind. You remove the evidence, you remove the deed. They must stay with narratives on them where we can use them as part of our education in schools and in the community in general. And that's why I feel we've taken down 2 statues. The 3rd statue should be racism, and we should not move beyond that. The 3rd statue should be racism because it has damaged and killed enough people.
Isn't this a huge opportunity through the education system, both to reintroduce the areas of Scottish political thought that have been neglected, like the radical tradition, and to confront Scotland's own history as part of the imperial project and the beneficiaries of the vast wealth often built on slave servitude?
Well, yes, I think the whole thing should be taught. The servitude of miners and salters, where they were treated so badly that they couldn't change their jobs without permission. And I think that should be taught. And for example, why I believe that this teaching is so important. I was in Pennycook a few years ago. This is where I lived. I've lived here since 1977. And I was walking in the middle of Pennycook, and 2 little boys saw me. And one of them looked at me and pointed, and he said, "There's an N-word man." And his brother slapped him on the head and said, "It's rude to point." And therefore, that little boy was taught that you shouldn't point at an adult, an oldish adult. But he was not taught to say, "I should not be called that name." And therefore, we've got to teach children what that name is about, what it relates to. And they will have a better understanding that I'm not just an N-word man.
So your campaign for a new inscription on the Dundas statue has met with success. You are encouraged by the momentum that has grown in the movement around the world. You were also been involved in advising Glasgow University about how to confront and make reparations for the fact that so many of its benefactors had a role in the slave trade. Were you satisfied with how Glasgow University responded to the advice they were given?
Absolutely. I was just a sort of an advisor, but the university did its own research. And again, this should be a model for all other institutions to follow. In fact, what they did was they looked at their history, looked at their records, and published a report to say, yes, we received about 200 million in legacies from slavery, the university. And remember, that university has been around before Columbus went to the New World. And therefore, we have a university putting its hand up and said, yes, we were involved. And they produced a plaque, which I had the great honor of unveiling. And on that plaque, it says, this university benefited from the suffering of enslaved people. I feel that Glasgow is like a first light. And I think that other institutions, some of them are now following Glasgow, but to me, that shows what honesty can do. It produces respect.
And your professorship, when it came in 1989, I think, and you're still given the accolade as Scotland's first black professor. But even now, only less than 1% of professorships around the universities of the United Kingdom would identify themselves as black. Isn't that an extraordinary comment on the which obviously emphasises your own breakthrough, but an extraordinary comment on the distance still to travel and a quality of opportunity?
We don't have enough representation, and people's attitude are also based on representation. I'll tell two quick stories. Was one, I was in Edinburgh last year to give a lecture, and the attendant at the door said, what do you want? And I said, I've come to give a lecture. And she said, at what time? And I said, 2:00. And she just looked at me and said, you can't be giving a lecture at 2:00 because that lecture has been given by Professor Sir Geoff Palmer. And the other one was when I went to another institution. And the chap said, do you know anybody in there? Because I wanted some help with my phone to charge it. And I said, yeah, I used to know the previous boss. And he said, the previous boss were your chauffeur. So we still have those perceptions of black people.
Now, the recognition and the honours flowed. You became a Knight of the Realm, an OBE, and a Freeman of Midlothian. I'm anxious to know, Geoff, does this freemanship of Midlothian, does it entitle you to anything in addition to a free bus pass? Do you get into buildings for nothing? Is there any great advantage in this freemanship? And are you in good company?
Well, yes, I was told I was in good company because the previous freeman was Nelson Mandela. So, it's a great act to follow. If we look back at our history, Midlothian was the seat of Henry Dundas, the politician who gradually abolished the slave trade to the benefits of the slave owners, so they could replace their slaves when their slaves died at a young age. This was his seat, and he must be turning in his grave to realize that one of the people who may have transported, is now the freeman of Midlothian, of which he was MP.
And finally, Sir Geoff Palmer, people have got good reason to toast your health when they're drinking a pint of beer because of your achievements in brewing. But when you survey your life of campaigning, what else would you like people to remember when they're toasting your health with a pint of Guinness or perhaps some other more local, more Scottish concoction?
Well, again, the greatest sort of reward for me, so I don't really need any more than this, because this is so wonderful. Whenever I go into a supermarket and I walk along the shelves and I see all the brands of beers or whiskey, and I know which one of my students, is involved with every brand that I see there because I taught them. And therefore, that's reward enough, because I walk along those shelves and I smile because I feel I've made some contribution, not only to their lives, but also to an industry that has been very good to me.
And will it be important for Scotland to understand that this was an achievement of Scotland's first black professor?
Well, yes, in a sense, yeah. The fact is that, when I'm walking about, I don't see myself as the Scotland black professor, but that is a truth. And, for example, when I came to Scotland, the university was threatened with the closure of the brewing department, in the 80s. And I panicked because I didn't think where I'd get another job. And I went to the distilling industry, and a wonderful man there, Mr. Ronnie Martin, listened to my story one lunchtime. I said, Ronnie, I think they're going to close the brewing. And he said, what? This is Scotland. We need that brewing school. It's always been here. And he said, leave it to me. And to cut a long story short, he came back to me a few weeks after that, and he said, Jeffrey, I got you £1 million from the distilling industry. And the brewers came in with 400,000. And that built the International Centre for Brewing and Distilling, the International Centre for Brewing and Distilling at the Heriot-Watt University. It is there now, and it's got students from all over the world being taught brewing and distilling as a science. And that's why our students are so good at what they do, because they know what they're doing.
Professor Sir Geoff Palmer, thank you so much for joining me on the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you, Alex.
When Geoff Palmer became a professor in 1989, he was Scotland's first ever black professor. Now, even today, less than 1% of all the professors in all the universities of the UK identify as black. Geoff Palmer's career is a reminder of just how much the United Kingdom owes to the contribution of the Windrush generation and how shabbily they were treated in return. Geoff Palmer's views were once regarded as challenging and controversial. They still remind us of the leap of the imagination that we require to make to achieve genuine racial equality. But they've stood the test of time and now have caught the mood of the moment. And so from Tasmina, myself and all at the show, it's goodbye for now. Stay safe, and we'll see you again next week.